Welcome back to the Anti-Cancer Lab. If you're new here, pull up a chair, you're in good company. This is where I read the cancer studies most people never see and tell you plainly what they mean for your plate. No fear, no hype. So grab a coffee and let's look at this together. Today's one is cheap, it's at any supermarket, and the science under it is genuinely more interesting than the headline lets on. Quick note before we start. I'm Dr. Becker. I'm a researcher, not your doctor, and I've never had cancer or treated a patient. Everything you hear from me is me sitting with published studies and translating them into plain English for general education. None of it is medical advice, and none of it replaces your oncologist or whatever treatment you're on. Take what's useful and bring it to the people actually caring for you. Now, let me tell you where today's video came from, because it's honest. A few nights ago I was up at 2 in the morning with one paper I could not put down. It was a study on berries and DNA. And I want to be careful with how I say this, because the title of this video promises something no food on earth can do. Let me get that out of the way right now, plainly. No food multiplies your DNA repair by 100. That's a number that grabs attention, and I put it up there because that's the language the internet speaks. Here's what berries genuinely do, and it's still worth your time. They lower the oxidative damage that scratches your DNA in the first place, and they calm the low-grade, smoldering inflammation that lets already damaged cells settle in and thrive. Prevention of the scratch and cooling of the fire. That's the real story, and it's a better one than the hype. So let me back up and start where cancer actually starts, because if you understand this one thing, everything else today lands. Think of every cell in your body as having an instruction book inside it. That book is your DNA. Cancer doesn't come out of nowhere. It begins when that instruction book gets damaged. A typo here, a torn page there, over years. Your body has repair crews that fix most of those typos, all day, every day. That's the repair the title is gesturing at, and it's worth understanding honestly. You do have DNA repair machinery, real proteins whose whole job is proofreading and fixing the book. No food cranks that machinery up 100-fold. What the right foods do is take some of the workload off it, so fewer errors slip past in the first place. It's less like hiring 100 new proofreaders, and more like handing the ones you already have a cleaner manuscript to work with. But some errors still slip through. And here's the part I want you to really hear. Those typos pile up faster when two things are going on. 1. Oxidative damage. 2. Chronic inflammation. Let me translate both in plain terms, because I hate when people throw these words around like everybody went to medical school. Oxidative damage. Picture cutting an apple and leaving it on the counter. It goes brown. That browning is oxidation, the same rough process happening in slow motion inside your cells every day. The messy leftovers of that process are unstable little molecules, and they bump into your DNA and nick it, scratch the instruction book. That's oxidative DNA damage. And inflammation. Now, inflammation isn't the enemy by itself. When you sprain an ankle and it swells, that's inflammation doing its job, sending in help. The problem is the low, quiet, always on kind. The smolder that never fully goes out. And this isn't fringe. In the actual textbook framework of how cancer works, the one Hanahan and Weinberg laid out, chronic inflammation is listed as an enabling characteristic. In plain words, it's the condition that lets a damaged cell get away with it. A fire that helps the bad seed take root. So if you want to shift your odds, you go after both. Fewer scratches on the book and less fire around it. Hold that picture. Everything on the plate today is aimed at those two targets. Alright, let me tell you what I'd actually put on my own plate, and then I'll show you the studies underneath it. The food is dark berries, and if I'm being specific, black raspberries, blackberries, blueberries, the deep purple, almost black ones. The color is not decoration. The color is the medicine in a real sense, and I'll show you why. That deep pigment comes from a family of compounds called anthocyanins. Say it with me slowly. Anthocyanins. That word just means the plant pigment that makes a berry purple-black instead of pale. That's it. The darker and richer the berry, the more of it. And alongside the anthocyanins, dark berries carry another compound called ellagic acid, which your body releases from something in the berry called ellagitanins. Ellagic acid, ellagitanins. I know, they sound like spell components. Just hold on to this. Two compounds, the pigment and the acid. Both of them go after exactly the two targets I just drew for you, the scratches and the fire. And here's a rule of thumb you can use standing right in the produce aisle. No lab coat required. The color tells you the dose. A pale, watery, pink inside strawberry has far less of that pigment than a blackberry so dark it stains your fingers. When you press a ripe blackberry and it leaves that deep purple mark on your thumb, that stain is the anthocyanin. That's the compound, right there on your skin. So, when you shop, reach for the darkest, richest ones. Black raspberries if your store has them, then blackberries, then the deep blue blueberries. Darker is stronger. That's the whole shopping strategy. Let me put the first one on the plate before we go deeper. At the supermarket, here's exactly what to grab. A bag of frozen dark berries. Frozen, I mean it. Frozen berries are picked ripe and flash frozen, and they hold their anthocyanins just fine, sometimes better than the sad, week-old fresh ones trucked across the country. A bag runs you a few dollars and lasts weeks in the freezer, versus fresh berries that go soft and moldy in your fridge in 4 days and cost twice as much. A cup a day, thawed into oatmeal or yogurt, is a completely doable, completely realistic amount. You don't need a specialty powder, you don't need a capsule, you need the freezer aisle. That's movement one, and it's already actionable. Now here's where it gets practical on the science. Let me tell you what the studies actually found, and I'm going to be honest about what kind of studies they were, every single time, because on this channel that matters. Second thing, and this is the meat of it, there's a researcher named Gary Stoner, worked at Ohio State for decades, and he essentially built his career on one fruit, the black raspberry. Not a supplement company's black raspberry, the berry. He fed animals freeze-dried black raspberry powder in models of oral, esophageal, and colon cancer, and across a lot of that work, the berries reduced the kind of DNA damage we've been talking about and pushed damaged cells toward a process called apoptosis. Apoptosis. That's just the fancy word for a cell's built-in self-destruct button. A broken cell that quietly agrees to shut itself down instead of dividing out of control. That's a good thing. You want your worn-out, damaged cells taking themselves off the field. Now, let me say that more carefully, because I can already hear the objection. I know what some of you are thinking. So, it kills cancer then? No. Stop. That's not what these studies show, and I won't let you walk away with that. In a lab dish, and in animals, these compounds nudged damaged cells toward apoptosis and lowered inflammatory markers. A berry does not kill cancer in your body the way a headline says. What Stoner also ran, and this is the part that genuinely holds more weight, were small human biomarker trials. In people with Barrett's esophagus, and in people with colon and rectal tissue changes, freeze-dried black raspberries moved some of the biomarkers in the right direction. Even, in some of the work, appearing to switch certain protective genes back on, that inflammation had quieted down. Small trials, biomarkers, not survival curves, but real and in humans. And that's rare enough in the berry world that it's why I was up at 2 in the morning. Let me put that on the plate before we move on. This is not a reason to run out and buy a $200 tub of black raspberry extract. It's a reason to keep dark berries in your freezer and eat them like a habit, not a prescription. The people in those trials were eating real, freeze-dried fruit. You can get most of the way there with a cup of frozen blackberries and a spoon. Which brings me to the compound most people skip, the ellagic acid. When researchers put ellagic acid on cancer cells in the dish, they saw a few things at once. It interfered with the cells copying themselves. It turned up the body's own tumor suppressor signals. Think of those as the brakes on a cell, the P53 you may have heard of. That's a brake. And it turned down a master inflammation switch inside the cell called NF-kappa-B. That switch, NF-kappa-B, is basically the dial that controls a lot of that smoldering fire I described. Turn the dial down, less fire, fewer conditions for a bad cell to thrive. Now, cold honesty, right here, that's in vitro. That's a dish. That is not proof of anything happening in your body at the amount you'd eat from berries. I want you excited about the mechanism and clear-eyed about the ceiling. It tells us why the fruit is plausible. It does not tell us the fruit is a treatment. Let me build on that with the inflammation side, because this is where there's actual human data and I want to give you the honest shape of it. Across a number of human trials, people taking in more anthocyanins, the pigment, showed lower levels of an inflammation marker in the blood called CRP. CRP, C-reactive protein. It's a simple blood test your own doctor can run, and it goes up when there's inflammation smoldering in the body. Now here's the honest catch, and I won't oversell it. The trials don't all agree. Some show a nice drop in CRP, especially at higher doses. Others show barely a wiggle. If I lined up every study, the overall picture leans toward berries and their pigments modestly cool inflammation, not berries slash your inflammation, modestly, over time. That's the truthful version, and anyone telling you a bowl of blueberries reset your inflammation overnight is selling you something. Alright, same idea, different angle, and this one almost nobody mentions. It's not just the pigment and the acid, it's the fiber, and where the fiber ends up. A dark berry is one of the highest fiber fruits you can buy, and a lot of those berry compounds don't get fully absorbed up high in your gut. They travel down to your colon, where the bacteria living there go to work on them. And here's why that matters for the DNA story. Those gut bacteria ferment the fiber and turn it into small compounds, one of them called butyrate, and butyrate, say it however you like, butyrate, is basically fuel and a calming signal for the cells lining your colon. It helps keep that lining healthy and helps damaged cells there take the self-destruct exit instead of dividing. So a berry is doing double duty. Some of the good happens where you absorb it, and some of it happens deeper down, feeding the bugs that protect your colon lining. This is part of why colon and rectal tissue is exactly where Stoner saw some of his clearest human biomarker signals. The berry gets delivered right to the scene. Let me put that on the plate, because I promised I always would. This is one more reason to eat the whole berry and not the extract. A pill of isolated anthocyanin skips the fiber entirely. It never reaches your colon bugs. The $4 bag of frozen blackberries does. So when I say buy the fruit, not the pill, this is one of the reasons I mean it, not just a slogan. Here's how I'd actually work all of this into a week, because mechanism without a plate is just trivia. A cup of frozen dark berries, most mornings, thawed into plain Greek yogurt or oatmeal. And pair them with a little fat, a spoon of yogurt, a few walnuts, a drizzle of the milk you already use. The reason is simple and worth knowing. Anthocyanins and their cousins get absorbed a bit better with some fat and protein alongside them, instead of eaten stone cold on their own. So berries plus yogurt beats berries plus nothing. Now, let me be honest about the thing that stops most people, because a cup a day sounds easy until you're standing in your kitchen at 7 in the morning. A cup of frozen berries thawed in the microwave is soupy and a little sour, and if that's your only way to eat them, you'll quit by week 2. I've watched people do exactly that. So here are the cheap tricks that make it stick. 1. Warm them 30 seconds and stir them straight into hot oatmeal. The oats soak up the color and it turns the whole bowl purple and sweet. 2. Blend a cup with a little milk and a spoon of peanut butter into a 2-minute morning shake. No cooking, no dishes. 3. Keep them frozen and eat them like tiny sorbet pieces in the afternoon when you'd normally reach for a cookie. That last one saved a stubborn friend of mine who swore he hated fruit. The habit is the whole ball game. A perfect berry you don't eat does nothing. A frozen blackberry you actually swallow, most days, for years, is the intervention. Pennies a serving, no cooking, any supermarket in the country. Let me sit with someone for a minute, because this stuff gets real fast. Last winter I spoke with a woman, I'll call her Delia, 69, sharp as a tack, who'd lost her older sister the year before, and had spent months terrified of every bite she took. She'd read that sugar feeds cancer, so she'd cut fruit entirely, all of it, berries included, and she came to me almost apologetic, asking if she was allowed to eat a blueberry. That broke my heart a little. Here's what I told Delia, and I'll tell you, the whole dark berry, eaten as fruit, is not the sugar problem the internet warns about. It comes wrapped in fiber, in that pigment, in the very compounds we've been talking about. Cutting berries out of fear is cutting out one of the few foods with real human biomarker data behind it. She started a cup of frozen blackberries in the morning again, not as a cure, as permission to stop being afraid of her own breakfast. That's the register I want you in, not fear, habit. And let me take on the one objection I know is sitting in half of your heads right now, because Delia raised it and it deserves a real answer, not a wave of the hand. But berries have sugar. Doesn't sugar feed cancer? This is the single most common fear I get letters about, and I'll tell you my honest read of it. Here's the thing people get backwards. Yes, in a petri dish, cancer cells are greedy for glucose, sugar. That's the old Warburg observation from the 1930s, and it's real. But that does not mean the fruit sugar in a blackberry, wrapped in fiber and pigment and eaten as whole food, is pouring gasoline on a fire in your body. Let me say that more carefully, because it's important and people run too far with it. The problem sugar, the sugar tied to worse outcomes, is the flood of it. The soda, the sweet tea, the pastry that spikes your blood sugar and drives up insulin over years. A cup of whole berries does not do that. It comes packaged with fiber that slows the sugar down and with the very anti-inflammatory compounds we spent this whole video on. To cut berries out of fear of their sugar is to throw away one of the best studied foods you can eat, to dodge a threat that whole fruit was never really posing. So no, eat the berry. It is not the sugar you were warned about. That distinction, whole fruit versus the flood, is one of the most useful things you can carry out of today. Now let me be straight with you about the ceiling, because I promised I would. None of this is a cure. A cup of berries does not undo a smoking habit, it does not replace a colonoscopy, and it absolutely does not replace whatever your oncologist has you on. What berries do is shift the odds a little, over years, by lowering the oxidative scratches on your DNA and taking a bit of the heat out of the inflammation that lets damaged cells settle in. That's the honest size of it. It is the difference between being a safe driver and buying a guarantee. There are no guarantees here. Anybody who hands you one is reaching for your wallet. What I'm handing you is a cheap, pleasant, well-studied habit that stacks the deck slightly in your favor, 3 times a day if you wanted to. And one more honest thing, because I'd be a hypocrite otherwise. Let me tell you what does not work, so you don't waste your money. The isolated ellagic acid capsules on the supplement shelf. The mega-dose anthocyanin extracts in the fancy bottles. The human evidence that those concentrated pills do what the whole fruit does is thin to absent, and some of the most interesting work was done with the actual freeze-dried berry, not a pill. So, skip the $50 bottle. Buy the $4 bag of frozen fruit. I mean that. So here's your one thing this week. On your next shop, pick up 1 bag of frozen dark berries. Blackberries, blueberries, black raspberries if your store carries them, whatever's cheapest and darkest. Put a cup in your bowl most mornings, on top of yogurt or oatmeal, with something with a little fat in it. That's the entire assignment, not a regimen, not a cleanse. A cup of frozen fruit and a spoon of yogurt, most days, for the rest of your life if you like it. And if you already do this, good. You were ahead of me. You hold one lever, every single day, 3 times a day. Your plate. So much of cancer feels out of your hands, and honestly, a lot of it is. You don't get to choose your genes or your luck. But this you do choose, meal by meal, and that's not nothing. It is quietly one of the most consistent things you can do, and unlike so much of what scares people, it costs almost nothing, and it tastes good. Food isn't a cure, but it's the one lever you hold 3 times a day. Use it, bring it to your oncologist and the people caring for you, and let them do the rest. That's the whole game. Small, repeatable, alongside your team. If you want the simple version of all of this written down, I've put together a free guide called the Anti-Cancer Plate that lays out the foods with real research behind them, berries included, in plain language. It's linked and pinned for you, no charge. Take it if it helps. Keep it simple, keep it on your plate, and I'll see you right back here. Bring a friend who needs this. And tell me in the comments which berry you're starting with this week, and whether you're a fresh or a frozen person. I read every one of these.